So yeah, guys, let's talk a little bit about the color picker. So there's a lot of things that I want to talk about. First is that it's really hard to understand this when you're just starting out because it's just a lot of math stuff and just a lot of variance that you're not actually realizing that you're affecting when you're using this. So you just think, okay, I want to pick pretty colors when you're starting. Okay, how do I make this look good? How do I make the colors actually work? So you're not really focusing on, okay, what's the reasoning behind this? How do I use this? Okay, so it gets really hard because it just shows you 10,000 different options at the same time, and it's just way harder to choose when you have more options, right? It's easier to choose even if you don't know something. It's just easier to choose something because you have less possible choices, right? You have less possibility to be wrong in a sense. So with Photoshop and digital painting, you have a lot of chance to be wrong. You have a lot of chance to be just random because it gives you all of the colors of the world, right? Every painter in history would just kill for having just every color at his disposal for no uh, extra price, right? It's just a crazy idea for them, and we take it for granted for most of the time and just make choices based on nothing. And therefore, a big thing that you gotta learn is how to limit yourself in a sense, how to just not make random choices, just to make a few choices based on something. I would say is more important. So the first thing is limit yourself and really try to think simple. Don't overcomplicate things because they are already really complicated, and you don't have to complicate it more. So I want to separate this on a few parts. So the first thing that I want to talk about is this right here, and this changes the hue of the color. It's really easy to understand. Hue is one of the simplest ideas, I think, because it's what you learn in school. Like, this is blue, this is green. Okay, one of the first things that you learn as a baby is that there are different colors, and you learn how to see so and identify them. So understanding hue is easy, really easy, but using the hue right on a painting is so hard. It's just really not not comparative because knowing how to when actually to change the hue when the painting is asking for hue change is really hard. It's something that you need to develop over the years, and something that you really learn too is that your notion of color is really a solid thing when you're growing up. But as a painter, it should be really uh, more flexible in a sense because a green is not always going to be a green. It depends on the colors that are around it. So a color is not something that is uh, forever going to be the same. They change based on the things that are around them. So a color is not an absolute thing. And one of the major ways of controlling color is actually using this area right here, which is called the hue controller. So the hue controller is actually a tool for you to just change the hue of colors based on other hues. So it's just putting all the colors together in a big line and comparing them all. So that's a pretty good way of understanding that because you stop thinking about colors separately and you start thinking about colors together, and that's really the key for this. So just try to understand that you're trying to make, for instance, a blue more towards purple or more towards green, and that really changes the appearance of the blue and the effect that that blue has in your eye. And your brain can really understand, even if you don't paint at all, your brain can understand that a blue is more purplish or more green. It's a really trained thing in your brain. Okay. So hue variation is super important. Just realizing that a color can change slowly to become its neighbor, like I just said. Okay, so a blue more towards red because it becomes more purplish. Okay, so and so on with every color, and that really contributes to the relativeness of those colors. Another thing that is harder in Photoshop is that you have to realize that the hue controller is actually the color wheel wide open. And why is this harder? Is because it's harder to actually see the relations of color between themselves. It's like it's hard to see with the way Photoshop is that the blue is actually the complementary color of orange and the green is the complementary color of red. So it's really hard to see those sort of relations of color, and that makes it a bit tricky really to understand how to balance colors just have just by having them numbered in a big line, you know. So the idea here is really to make more precise variations on the hues. When using the hues, try to be more precise and less jumpy. Try to be more, okay, I want a blue towards green, but how much? Okay, this much is okay. And really try to be precise when deciding the hue. Take your time, be slow, and the way to be fast is actually start slow, right? Because you're making good decisions, and the more you make those good decisions, the faster you get. When you're trying to make it fast, you're actually trying to rush it, and you're making bad decisions, and you're trying to rush it again, and you make more bad decisions. And so taking a step back is a really important thing. This area right here is a bit trickier for you to understand when you're just starting out, because Photoshop gives you a hue controller, but it also gives you a graph. And this graph is a big reason why many people don't know how to pick colors at the beginning and just end up picking random colors. I did that for a long time, and I still messed up colors a lot of times. But the way to understanding this is breaking into smaller parts. So we gotta understand the graphic first. So we got two axes here. We got this horizontal axis, which means the saturation of things, and we got this vertical axis, which means the actual brightness of things. So when you're just starting out and Photoshop gives you a graph to work with, it is a big jump, right? To not understanding colors to using a full graph of colors. And so I'll definitely say that this is easier when you're understanding what you're doing, and way harder when you're not understanding. So a general rule about this horizontal axis is that the more towards the right, the more pure the color is. So the more blue in this case. And the more towards the left, the opposite is true. So the more grayish you're gonna get. So when you're just floating around this graph, just really try to think about those separate parts. Really try to think about, okay, I'm making my color less saturated by moving it here. I'm making the color more saturated. I'm making it brighter and less saturated. I'm making it brighter and more saturated. So just really focus on making smaller decisions. So the tip that I wanted to give to people that are watching this about the color picker is that you should really take one step at a time when you're using Photoshop, because it doesn't make you take one step at a time, and it just trying to make you fall basically, because it's giving you too many choices. So take one step at a time, think about one of those variables at a time, and just don't get too complicated, because when you'll be painting, you're gonna get things messed up a lot of times until you get this right. So just take it easy. Try to do it over and over and over again for like 500 times, and then you start understanding it and making decisions more easily, right? So The thing is that when you're watching a painter choose colors directly, like sometimes it looks like random, and sometimes it looks just a big step. Uh, but he's really just trained that a lot, and he's just used to making that choice even faster every time. So it's not there's no way around it. You should just take one step at a time. Just really think about colors. Really focus on the different aspects and variables of this. So thinking about those things separately sounds really easy. So why is painting so hard? Because we're trying to think about it all at once, and we're trying to mix all those concepts together. And the key, I think, is don't try to make it a super quick decision. Try to slowly think about it, and it's gonna be much better, I promise. So yeah, guys, I want to talk a little bit about controlling your paintings and actually making new colors instead of just using the out of Photoshop. That idea of controlling your colors is very important, but because a lot of people at the beginning, including myself, when I was starting out, I used to use the color selector, this tool right here, on Photoshop a lot. So I got very gray colors at the beginning of my career, and something I had to learn over the time was that uh, selecting new colors by hand, actually using this tool right here to make a new color, is better for you. Um, I don't say ignore the color picker all the time. This tool right here, but for sure try to avoid it. I'm gonna show why. So if you have two pretty saturated colors here, oh, not so saturated, pretty saturated colors here. Okay, this and this is good. Two blobs of color, and you mix them together using the opacity of your brush, like you're pressing it a little smoothly, because you want to make a new color, and you actually get some sort of purple, right? Because you're mixing red and blue. So this purple is for sure less saturated than those initial colors. That is something that uh, they brought into Photoshop from traditional painting, because it works like that. When you mix two colors, the result is a more grayish color for sure. Like that's no exception. You're never gonna get more saturated than the pure colors, right? You can get more saturated than the initial colors, because I like to think in the term saturated exactly as a pure color. So when you mix two pure colors, you're making them less pure in a sense. So this new color, as you see, this is pretty saturated, this is pretty saturated, and this is way less saturated. So if you actually mix again the color, and mix again and mix again and start mixing forever with just a little opacity, it's gonna get every time less and less saturated, right? If you're mixing the colors that are already in the painting. So that happens a lot when you're painting, because you start just selecting the colors of your own painting and painting them again on the canvas. If you do that, please watch out, because that's probably making your colors very gray in the ending of a painting, and that's not good. You have to have more control over it, because you can lead it to chance if you want to work with it. You have to be reliable, so you have to know how to choose the colors and not just trust the randomness of the world. So the more you mix them, the more gray you get. So it's getting pretty gray, this area here, and that works with every color. If you It doesn't matter actually if you select a new color and mix it again. Even if it's saturated, if you use only a little bit of pressure, is gonna be always less saturated. You cannot actually mix colors and make it more saturated, right? That goes that never happens because you're adding new elements to the mix, and so they are going to be mixed with the elements that you already have. So the more you do this in your paintings, like this paint, this paint, this paint, the more gray you're gonna have. And I used to do that a lot when I was painting something. I would just I don't know, select a new color and start painting, and then start mixing, start mixing, start mixing, start mixing, start. And of course, this is super gray because the background's gray, but that that effect always happens. Even if you're using, actually, it happens more if you're using very saturated colors, because you're gonna see that the new colors you make here are way less saturated, right? So try to avoid this color picking all the time. I'm not against using the tool. I use that. It's a good tool. Don't get me wrong, but the idea I wanna talk about is try to control more of your paintings. Try to be more bold with your decisions. Try to be more precise and actually selecting new colors by hand, painting them opaquely, because you will have more control over the resulting color, right? So, okay, I want to make this more towards blue, so I'm gonna just more towards green, so I'm just selecting by hand and using it again. So I know why I selected this color. It's not getting away from me. Sometimes a painting does that. It gets away from your control. It's super common. It's weird, but whoever paints understand that concept of actually losing control of a painting, having it just run away from you. So that's very common, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So the big tip is try to use less the color picker and more the color selection tool thing, and try to use more the color picker. And as the painting needs new colors, right? Try to be more logical with the colors and control more. That's probably gonna have a good effect in your paint, because you will actually paint them and not leave it to chance, right? So try to do that, guys, and I really hope it helps.